Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm so glad you're all here today. Thank you for being here. I'm going to break the cardinal rule of preaching. I'm going to make an announcement before the sermon. As you heard in the announcement, we're having our Surviving the Holidays workshop with the grief share material. And it's in the evening on Tuesday. And I know that there are some who probably would like to attend but can't get out that late or drive after dark and things of that nature. So as such, the workbook that we use for that workshop, I would still encourage you to please come to the workshop for the videos and for the discussion. It will benefit you. But if you can't, there are copies of the workbook back on the table between the doors back there. We have lots and lots and lots and lots of copies of that book. So if you would like one, please take one. Or if you know of someone who may have suffered a loss recently or in this past year, and you think they would benefit, there's a lot of really good information in that book, so please feel free to take one. So maybe sometime mom and dad are kind of being a little flirty with each other, and maybe dad leans in and gives mom a kiss, and the kids go, "Ew, gross!" They don't want to see that. They don't want to think about that. But actually, they should be looking at that and say, that should be the goal that you set for yourself. You should want that kind of marriage, that kind of relationship. But that's the way kids are, it's kind of a childish attitude, but maybe sometimes that kind of childish attitude makes it into the church a little bit too. Because I think the church, speaking in very broad terms, fails a great deal when it comes to the topic of physical intimacy. Because it's awkward, it makes people uncomfortable, we're not sure what to say, so we just don't say anything. And we really do a disservice, I think, to young couples who are looking to get married, for our young people, for the teens and things like that. All we basically will say to them is like, don't get pregnant, and good luck to you. And that's not good enough. We've come in this series to the Song of Solomon, and I'm not just going to skip it. That would be wrong, because God put it in the Bible for a reason. It is for our benefit. It is inspired. It is every bit as inspired as Isaiah or Matthew or Revelation. God thought it was necessary. Therefore it is necessary. But how do we go about discussing it? How do we interpret it? First of all, there's some disagreement about this. Some scholars over the years, again with that feeling of awkwardness, they've tried to say, maybe it's not really, we can't just take it at face value. Maybe it's an allegory of God's love for Israel, God's love for his chosen people. And there could be some aspects of that. When we get to the minor prophets, the prophet of Hosea does a lot better job at that, and we know that that's the message behind that prophecy, because God tells us that it is, that Hosea's marriage is an illustration of his relationship with Israel. But what the Song of Solomon does is it really celebrates the joy and the blessing of marital love as established by God. It was a scripture that was actually read every Passover. Passover was, in the Jewish traditions, the only feast, the only one of the festivals where the husbands and wives would worship together. And it was read every Passover, the Song of Solomon. And as we get into the text, there are bits of it. If you've read the Song of Solomon, first of all, if you haven't read the Song of Solomon, or if you haven't read it in a while, that's your homework. Go home today and read the Song of Solomon. There are bits of it that are spicy, if we could say. But they're not obscene. It's God's word. It is not obscene in any way. It is beautiful, and it is useful to us. It is the best marriage manual for a godly relationship that you will ever find. So as such, I'm going to try to present this to you today that it is very practical for us, and it is very needed, because we have a culture and a world that is swimming in sexual immorality, in wrong ideas, ungodly ideas about sex and marriage and physical relationships. And marriage itself has been cheapened, has been denigrated, and that is not as it should be. But this is called the Song of Solomon, Some older translations refer to it as the Song of Songs. I think I like that a little bit better. Solomon is the one who wrote it. But the Song of Songs means that there's none better. It's as good as it gets. And it is incredibly beautiful. But it does give us practical insight into the challenges, the sacredness, and the joy of a godly marriage. And it reveals the greatest fulfillment that is possible in any human relationship. It's 8 chapters long, and it's not 8 chapters of sappy puppy love. It talks about real life challenges that come in any relationship. As we get into the text here, the Song of Solomon is again, it is a discussion. It is an interaction between Solomon, who is the king, he is the man in the story, and there is the woman who is his wife, who is referred to as the Shulamite, indicating likely where she was from. Now, chronologically, we can't really nail it down exactly when Solomon wrote this. We know Solomon had his, 1,000 wives and concubines. Where was that in this structure? We're not sure exactly. The general understanding, which is what I'm going to work with here today, is that the woman in this story, the woman in this account here, was either Solomon's first wife, but it certainly was his great love. Maybe it was, if he had several wives by then, it was his favorite wife. I'm not saying that's a great thing. This is a different time, but this is the way the book is to be interpreted, that this is Solomon's greatest and truest love. And that is the image of that godly marriage that God wants us to take from this. But it begins by the woman, the Shulamite, speaking here. It begins with her speaking. And it begins with, and it shows her insecurities. No relationship is perfect, no marriage is perfect. There are some problems, there are some issues that come up. And one of these here that we see immediately is her insecurity. We see her worries. In verse 5, she says, I am black, or dark, some versions say, but I am lovely. O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon, do not stare at me because I am swarthy, for the sun has burned me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me caretaker of the vineyards, but I have not taken care of my own vineyard. So she begins by talking about her appearance. She's insecure. She says, my skin is dark. Now, there's people today that will pay a lot of money to get a tan. Like a nice tan. At this time, though, the prevailing opinion was that it seemed to be more attractive in this age to have pale skin, because that meant that you were inside the palace. You were pale and pampered, and that was just kind of the standard of beauty, I guess, at the time. So she's concerned because we call it farmer's tan. Out working out in the sun, your skin gets dark, and her skin has been darkened from that, it seems, working out in the vineyards. And she's worried that makes her feel less attractive. And in chapter 2 and verse 1, she says, I am the rose of Sharon, the lily of the valley. Now, I don't know about you, I think the rose of Sharon is beautiful. If you have one of those, it's a bush, you have one in your yard, they're beautiful. My wife really loves the rose of Sharon. And it's a very pretty plant, but it's not really what you would consider like making a bouquet out of to give to your dearest love. It's not like a dozen long-stemmed roses. And the lily of the valley, she's talking about like wildflowers here. Again, very pretty, but not what you would see as the height of, romance. So that's how she describes herself. She says, well, my skin's, I'm not as pretty as other girls maybe, and I'm a flower, but just kind of a plain, ordinary flower, nothing special or anything. So she's showing her insecurity. And yet, see how the response comes from her true love here, from Solomon. He reassures her, and that's what she needs. She needs that reassurance. She's really asking him, do you really find me attractive? Am I really pretty? And he says to her in verse 8 of chapter 1, he said, if you yourself do not know, most beautiful among women, go forth on the trail of the flock and pasture your young goats by the tents of the shepherds. To me, my darling, you are like my mare among the chariots of Pharaoh. And he begins to describe how beautiful she is to him. So she's worried about her appearance, and he takes that concern and turns it into a compliment. He says, you don't even know how beautiful you are. But let me tell you, he says, you are the most beautiful of all women. You're not just pretty good. I'll take it. He says, you are the most beautiful of all women. And then down in verse 2 of chapter 2, she referred to herself as the rose of Sharon, the lily of the valleys. How does he respond? He says, oh, you're a lily, all right. You're like a lily among the thorns. So is my darling among the maidens. She is the best of all her contemporaries. If she's just a plain old wildflower, every other woman is just a bunch of thorns. He's working it here. But that's what she needs him to say. This entire book is not a record of events and historical happenings, or even prophecies or anything like that we would find in other parts of the Bible. It is about communication. And, the old cliche is communication is the key, especially in relationships, especially in marriage. Well, cliches are rooted in truth. It became a cliche because it's true. Communication is the key. This entire book is simply a dialogue between the two of them. It's a conversation. But like any relationship, again, there are challenges and there are things that change over time. Anyone who's been married for a period of time knows that things aren't the same when you first got married as they are later. Things change. Life changes. And there can be some challenges that come along. There can be some difficulties. In chapter 3 and verse 1, it's sometimes unclear to see exactly what's going on with some of the visions and the imagery that's going on here, but it seems that there's been some kind of conflict between them. She had a bad dream. Husbands, have you ever done that? Your wife is mad at you because you did something in their dream? I don't even know how to answer that. There's no way out of it. But she's upset. She says, one night on my bed, after I sought him, whom my soul loves, I sought him, but I did not find him. And then she goes and she looks throughout the city for him. But there's something, maybe they had a fight. Maybe they had an argument about something. But maybe that feeling has changed over time. Now, some wives may have said, I searched for him, but I could not find him. Where is the man that I married? What happened to him? He's not here anymore. So sometimes there are those changes. And the Song of Solomon tells us honestly that those things are part of life. They are part of any relationship. I love this one in chapter 2. In verse 14, the Shulamite here is speaking again. She says, "O my dove, in the clefts of the rock, in the secret place of the steep pathway, let me see your form. Let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your form is lovely. Catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that are ruining the vineyards, while our vineyards are in blossom." So it seems that she wants them to go away to some secret place, a little getaway, a little private getaway. And she says, catch the little foxes that are nibbling away at the plants of the vineyard. They're causing problems. These could represent a lot of things. In any relationship, there is issues that come up that sort of nibble away at the healthy vines of that relationship. They eat away at it, and they've got to be dealt with. They've got to be stopped. These could be things like annoying habits that we have that get on each other's nerves. These could be tasks that maybe are left undone, that are just sort of nagging, never seem to get off your mind. You can't stop thinking about them. Maybe there is unresolved conflict. Maybe there is unforgiveness that is happening. But I want to give you another possibility of what may be indicated here. Catch the little foxes for us. I am here to tell you that children are a blessing. They are a blessing. They are a gift from God. But they can provide a strain on intimacy. It's just a fact. You only have so many hours in the day. Children need a lot of attention. Perhaps the Shulamite is saying we need to catch the little foxes and round them up so that we can have some time together. That's something that takes some effort, takes some intention. There are many things that can hinder intimacy in a relationship and even damage it. But there's nothing more damaging than unfaithfulness. The Song of Solomon teaches us the importance of fidelity. Now, the Bible teaches us through good examples and bad examples, do this, don't do this. And this is an instance where we're taught with a good example. Infidelity doesn't really seem to be a problem for them in here. We see how smitten they both are with each other. They have some conflicts, they make up afterwards, but there's no hint of any adultery or unfaithfulness as far as that goes. There's a repeated phrase that comes throughout the writing. 3 times the Shulamite says this phrase, I am my beloved's, and he is mine. She says it in chapter 2 and verse 16, chapter 6 and verse 3, and chapter 7 and verse 10. I am my beloved's, and he is mine. And she keeps saying this. Why does she keep saying this? Because it's important to her. It's important. Monogamy is the bedrock foundation of every marriage. It has to be. In the New Testament, 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 4, Paul writes there about how the husband does not own his body, but his wife does. And the wife does not own her body, but her husband does. There is a mutual giving there between the two. There is a recognition of selflessness. This is what Adam was referring to with Eve. When he said a man and a woman shall become one flesh, they will become not just talking about that physical bond, but there is a spiritual bond there. They literally become one creature, one unit, one organism. Now, when the Shulamite mentions this the 3rd time in chapter 7 and verse 10, there's a little bit of difference. There's a little different twist to it. She says, I am my beloved's, and he is mine. But the 3rd time she says, I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. So the desire adds in here. Now, that statement, his desire is for me, I can see 2 ways to interpret that. The first, when she says that his desire is for me, she's saying that his desire is directed toward her. He desires her. His desire is for me. It is toward me. It is about me. She is the object of that desire. It could also mean that his desire belongs exclusively to her. His desire is for me, not for anybody else. Equally important, I think, are both of those. Sexual purity is a real problem. Doesn't seem to be a problem for them, but for everyone else, it's something that has to be carefully considered. And this book really celebrates the idea of sexual purity. Unfortunately, our society doesn't. Our society celebrates promiscuity. If it feels good, do it. That's in stark contrast to God's Word. But the idea of chastity and purity is repeated over and over again throughout the book here. Several times the Shulamite refers to herself as a locked garden. She says that her garden, where all the beautiful plants and flowers grow, has a gate, and that gate is locked, and it's only open for her husband, for her beloved. In chapter 8, toward the end there's also another group in this that are called the chorus. Seems to be kind of a chorus of women, kind of a group of friends for the Shulamite, and she's talking to them about her true love. And her sisters, it says that her sisters guarded her virginity, and then her husband was able to reap the reward from that. Well, what greater gift could one give to his or her spouse? But the Song of Solomon emphasizes marriage as being the only godly approved place for that kind of intimacy. So I want to take this moment to give a word of caution, perhaps, to our young people, especially, really for everyone, but especially for the young people. And I'll just tell you what I told my kids. I told my sons, I said, boys, if that woman doesn't have the ring on her finger that you gave to her, you need to keep your hand off that woman. Because she's not yours. She doesn't belong to you. That's just the plain fact. And I said, if you try to engage in husbandly activities without being the husband, then you are stealing. You are stealing from that woman. You're stealing from her father, whom she may still be under the authority of, and you're certainly stealing from her future husband. Don't be a thief. You're not honoring her. You need to honor that woman. And acting in such a way as that is not honoring her. Be a man of honor. Don't be a thief. And to my daughters, I would tell all of you young ladies here today, please hear me very clearly about this. Your worth and your value is not in any way tied to your body. But don't let some boy steal and defile a precious gift that belongs to your husband. A man wouldn't do that. A boy will. Stay away from boys like that. Because I can promise you that there is no area of life where you will regret making a mistake more. But following God's plan for marriage doesn't mean that we are denying ourselves pleasure, but rather we are setting ourselves up to enjoy and receive the greatest gift from God and experience the greatest joy that two people can experience. So I want to end this morning with positive thoughts here, because it is truly what we find in the Song of Solomon. It's not a funeral dirge. It's a song of joy and celebration. It is a celebration of love, and the Shulamite and Solomon are both inviting the reader to share. They're proud of it. They want to welcome you in and say, see what God has blessed us with here. Again, it's the Song of Songs. It's the best there is. It's as good as it gets. Back in chapter 1 and verse 16. Listen to what the Shulamite says. She says to her beloved, how handsome you are, my beloved, and so pleasant. Indeed, our couch is luxuriant. The beams of our houses are cedars. Our rafters are cypresses, huge, massive trees. So it seems that they are often in some like a cabin, a getaway kind of a place. And she says that they are so in love that it just makes it seem like wherever you are is a palace. That's the kind of love that God wants us to have and experience. And notice as you would go and read through these verses and through these chapters, how thoroughly satisfied they are with each other. He sees her as the most beautiful of all. The most beautiful of all women. A lily among a bunch of thorns. The best of all possible. He says to her in chapter 6 and verse 8. In chapter 6 and verse 8 he says, there are 60 queens and 80 concubines and maidens without number. But my dove, my perfect one, is unique. She is her only mother's daughter. She is the pure child of the one who bore her. The maidens saw her and called her blessed. The queens and the concubines also, and they praised her. He says, you're the only one for me. There's a book that I recommend when I do premarital counseling. It's by Willard Harley. It's called His Needs, Her Needs. I think it's the best marriage relationship book that I've yet found. And it talks in there about the primary needs, the most important needs of men and women, because, spoiler alert, they're different. Things that are important to men, usually not so important to women, and vice versa. So this book hopes to educate on that. It's a very good book. I'll recommend it. But he gives basically the 5 most important needs for men, the 5 most important needs for women, and how to understand and appreciate that. And one of the things that he focuses on about men is that the man needs to know that his wife desires him. He needs to feel needed. He needs to feel desired. And it's important. And throughout the Song of Solomon, you see how he reacts, how he mentions this about her. He says, the glance of your eyes has stolen my heart away. How she looks at him. How she responds to him. His words and his actions show him that he is desired, that he is loved and appreciated and needed. And she, on the other hand, she needs to know that she satisfies him. that he is pleased with her, that she is all he will ever need, because that gives her a sense of security. It gives her a sense of stability and peace within herself, and that's something very important to her. And we see them giving that to each other throughout this book. And you see in their descriptions of each other. In chapter 4, Solomon is describing the Shulamite. Listen to the way he describes her. He starts in chapter 4 and verse 1, and he starts up at the top. He talks about her hair, and he just moves on down. He's like, this is beautiful, and this, and I love all of this about you. And he gets to the end of this list as he describes her from head to toe, and he says, you are altogether beautiful. The whole package. He's just amazed by it. And then in chapter 7, starting in verse 1, he starts at the bottom. He starts talking about how her feet are beautiful in the sandals that she's wearing. Ladies, you know how you like your shoes? He notices that. He says, your feet, and he starts at the bottom, works his way up. Top to bottom, bottom to top. And he says at the end of it again, he says, how delightful are all your charms. He said, there's not a flaw. I love every single little thing about you. What do we say? Love is blind? It's not always a bad thing. When we love someone this deeply, this passionately, it's going to overlook some faults. That's something that we should continue to try to keep alive. Love should always be blind in that way. We should try to give our spouse the benefit of the doubt. Try to see them in the best light possible and not assume the worst. It's a bad habit that we can get into. That's how he describes her. She describes him in much the same way. In chapter 5, this chorus of the ladies is asking her, and they said, tell us about this stud. Tell us about this man of yours. Why is he so great? She says, let me tell you. And she describes him. His curly hair, his strong arms, his legs of alabaster. She describes all this, and she starts describes all the things that she loves about him. And she says, again, at the end, he is altogether desirable. In the Song of Solomon, there is very descriptive language. And there is almost this language about kind of like a banquet table. You get the idea that they're sort of just like eating, drinking, and feasting upon each other in this love that they have for each other. And there are all these passionate exclamations that come all throughout the book over and over again. Oh, my beloved, my darling. And it's just coming from the depths of their love for each other. And it's not silly. It's not sappy. It's not juvenile. Marriage is supposed to be fun. It's a great gift from God. We're supposed to enjoy it. It's not, well, the old ball and chain. Some newlyweds will get some really great marriage advice. Somebody will come up and put their arm around the groom and say, well, the party's over. No. The party's just beginning, people. Yes, there are passages in the Song of Solomon that we might say are even graphic. But they are still utterly beautiful. The tradition was that Jewish boys were not allowed to read or study the Song of Solomon by themselves until they were 30 years old. Like I said, spicy. The physical intimacy is God's gift to man, and just like all of God's gifts, it is to be used properly and within the boundaries that he has set. The Hebrew writer said in Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 4 that the marriage bed is to be undefiled. The marriage bed is a holy place. It is a sacred place. It is to be kept undefiled. But that it is a place of sacredness if, according to God's rules and the boundaries that he has set. Now, I find it so interesting that the Song of Solomon ends on a rather suspenseful note. The last couple of verses, the Shulamite is calling to her beloved and saying, hey, hurry up and get out for work as soon as you can and come meet me in our secret place. She's inviting her husband to go off alone with her, and there's this sort of kind of suspenseful ending, which really shows the honeymoon doesn't ever have to end. Unfortunately, marriage is not as highly esteemed as it once was. God intended for marriage and for intimacy to be held as a sacred, holy, and precious gift. If we didn't have the Song of Solomon in the Bible might really be that dry old book of thou shalt nots that many people see it as. But the Song of Solomon celebrates the most intimate relationship that two people can have, the deepest connection that is humanly possible. It doesn't gloss over reality and the challenges. It isn't filled with, just the stuff of romance novels. There's real life in there. It does gush with the pure joy and passion of love, while still acknowledging that problems will arise, and they need to be worked through. Now in Ephesians chapter 5, beginning in verse 22, God used the marriage relationship as the model and the symbol for the Christian who submits to Jesus. That commitment that we make as a Christian. The church is the bride of Christ. And it requires dedication and total submission to that relationship. It requires unwavering faithfulness to Him for all the days of our life. And it also promises joy and a loving acceptance and security that we scarcely can imagine. Maybe today that you want to enter into that sacred union. If that's the case, then we stand ready to assist you to experience that connection and that joy and peace that Christ wants to give to you as your Lord. Or it may be that you have committed to Christ at some point in the past, but you feel that you have strayed. Maybe your love has grown a little cold and you want to rekindle that. In any case, we want to help you come back to that first love or come for the first time. If we can help you today to have that love and that peace, that joy that Jesus wants for you to have, please make that known to us as we stand and sing. Please come.